Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the organizers that have the possibility to come here to Munich in person. I'm here on one hand as clinical researcher, as a neurologist, a stroke physician, doing a lot of clinical research, and on the other hand, I'm the head of clinical stroke research at VASCage. And I want to share some experience that we have learned from the last 20 years of cohort studies that we have been performing in Innsbruck. And I want to keep it quite basic, because if you plan a study, there are some things that people do not tell you or do not like to tell you. Just an overview. I just want to drop a few words. What VASCage was, what is this, who we are, and then go to some important cohorts from the VASCage consortium and some lessons learned and pitfalls that we were experiencing, where you can learn from that. And also, if I have time, I go over some regulatory issues. VASCage is a research center for vascular aging and stroke. We are located in the heart of the Alps in Innsbruck, like 2 hours drive from Munich. And we are a research company, so we are our own private company that is owned from the Medical University of Innsbruck and the University of Innsbruck. We are funded by the largest funding body that is available in Austria, that's so-called COMET funding. This funding comes from the Republic of Austria and the participating provinces, and also from involved companies and research organizations. The idea of the COMET project is to bundle the scientific competence and technical know-how from academia and from competence. VASCage started as a COMET project nested in the Medical University of Innsbruck in 2014 and became a COMET center in 2019, so an independent company. And the basic idea of the COMET funding is that all companies and scientific partners are roughly doubled by the state of Austria. We also, as we are a company, also provide non-funded projects and research services. So our vision is to extend the healthy lifespan in the aging community by promoting vascular health. We do this by research on vascular aging, a lot of research based on clinical studies and biobanks. And our 5 pillars are the prevention, to develop new preventive strategies for vascular disease, to refine the diagnosis, especially of early vascular aging, develop and apply novel therapies, observe recovery after stroke, and how to promote recovery after stroke. And we have a very strong interest in post-stroke rehabilitation novel methods. And as I said, our mission is to make top research and translate this research into new products, processes, or services. So these are just the most important or the largest studies of the VASCage consortium. And I want to go through them and just what came to my mind, what were the pitfalls, what were the problems. There's a stroke cut study. The VASCage project was applied for in 2012, and it was turned down in the first round. We had 5 really nice projects. One project was the stroke card study, and we decided to start the stroke card study without the additional COMET funding. And this is already the first pitfall. The stroke card study is a randomized controlled trial on an intensified post-stroke disease management. So 10 years from now, it was like in the upper panel. In Austria, we have a very strong and very good network of stroke units. So basically, every person living in Austria can reach the next stroke unit within 40 minutes. So we have a very high-end acute stroke service, and we have a very good, in those days, inpatient rehabilitation facilities. But after that, post-stroke care was handed to the general physician. And what our vision was, that we make our stroke card care concept took care of the patients for the first 3 months after stroke. So we gave them specific information at discharge. We even had a very early app or web portal where their individual risk factors were visualized, and they could be, and the people could watch how it was modified. And but the core element was a 3-month follow-up visit that took 2 to 3 hours per patient, with a visit at a nurse for nursing needs, with therapists for rehabilitation need, and an extensive physician interview looking for all kinds of post-stroke complications, including also cognitive outcomes and depression outcomes, vascular risk factor, warning signs for non-stroke signs like cardiovascular, other cardiovascular diseases. And we had an outcome assessment after 12 months and standardized the data and a standardized biobank. And the problem was that we had this really lovely case report form. The printed version was like 200 pages. And when we considered we could, with the funding we had, could do this study, we found out, well, that's very hard. We were very lucky that our hospital supported us a lot. And we had, I think, over the time, 6 PhD students and around 15 medical students helping us with the trial. So it was quite successful. So we were able to randomize almost 2,200 patients in 2 centers in Austria to standard care or post-stroke intensified care. And just briefly want to show this, the only results from our cohorts we're going to show you, that we were very effective in reducing cardiovascular diseases after 1 year. And these are the 2 co-primary endpoints. And we have increased the health-related quality of life by this approach. And this really nice thing is, since this year, this led to an Austrian-wide reimbursement of a post-stroke care program of the 3 months post-stroke visit. So in 2014, finally, we got the VASCage project, so the first step of the COMET funding, and we have had also nice 5 projects, 2 large studies I want to point out, and the pitfalls. The early vascular aging in Tyrol study was a non-randomized controlled trial where we recruited 2,000 youngsters aged 14 to 19 years, and they were either allocated to a health promotion intervention and a 2-year follow-up, and we had a 500 participants control group, and we were driving with all these machines through Tyrol, Northern Tyrol, Eastern Tyrol, and Southern Tyrol in Italy, and make a very specific phenotyping of early vascular aging with pulse wave velocity, carotid and aortic, intima media thickness. We took blood, all the anthropometrics, lifestyle factors, nutrition, and we also got information from the mother-child booklet about the pregnancy or the early life and neonatal life of the participants. And the first pitfall there was when we planned the study in 2012 in Austria, there were a lot of physicians. So once they finished their education, they were very eager to stay at the university, and they were willing to stay for research purposes for 1 or 2 years. But as 2014, the EU directive for regulation of work time came into power, all of a sudden there was a huge need for physicians. And so we were not able to find anyone accompanying our students to all these research sites. And we ended up that the 2 project leads, this Ursula Kichel-Kohlendorfer, the head of the neonatology department, and myself were joining for more than 100 visits in 45 schools over 4 years. So this was quite some struggle. So please ensure that the personnel you have funded is also available on the market. Another thing, that the Bruneck study. The Bruneck study is not actually a VASCage cohort per se, because the Bruneck study was started in 1990 and is, so to say, the mother of all of our cohorts, because the protocols were developed over the last 30 years and adapted for all our trials. The Bruneck study is a population-based cohort study of vascular aging. In 1990, in the southern Tyrol city of Bruneck, where one of our senior stroke physicians came from, they just recruited a age and sex stratified population-based sample from the city, and 97% of the people that were asked were attending the visits. There were almost no dropouts over 25 years except for death. And in 2015, were 600 of the original cohort remaining, and we intended to recruit 2,000 participants of Bruneck more participants. So Innsbruck to Bruneck is like a 1-hour drive. We speak the same language, we even speak the same dialect, but the problem is the Penna bus is between Bruneck and Innsbruck, and Innsbruck is Austria and Bruneck is Italy. And even though this was an academic cooperation that was really fruitful for 25 years, things have become very, very complicated, even if you cross borders especially. So the contracting, so there was not a problem to organize the study, not at all. It was no problem to find, to recruit participants in BRUNIC. The problem, it took almost or more than 2 years to get the legislative stuff settled between the hospitals and the university. So plenty enough time for contracting. Even a data transfer agreement between 2 academic centers can take up to 5 months, like I experienced it recently. And I think for international contracting, you should at least plan 1 year of time. In 2019, we were very lucky to become an independent company, VASCage Center. And this was founded in April 2019. And in October 2019, we had our kickoff. All the head of the university and the head of VASCage and the politics, you see here, we're all very happy that we started. And we started with 3 large cohort studies. The early vascular aging in the youth study. So this is the spin-off of the health promotion program in healthy adolescents. We planned the stroke card, a long-term follow-up that was initially planned to 3 to 6 years follow-up, and the stroke card registry that just follows the clinical routine. The stroke card protocol was continued in Innsbruck after the end of the study, and so the stroke card registry follows the patients with a biobank over 8 years. So, but Austria is not, Tyrol is very well known for skiing, is also very well known for the Olympics, but since early 2020, we are also very known for very efficient spreader of the COVID pandemic. So we were hit very early and very hard in Tyrol. So the lockdowns were very tough, and this really affected all our cohorts. Only for these 3 studies, we had 5 PhD students employed, and all of a sudden, we filed for the early vascular aging project. We filed the ethics committee application in January, and I think 2 days before the first big lockdown, we got the confirmation from the ethics committee that we could technically start. For this school project, it was an on and off project. We were trying to go to schools, then we were thrown out again. And even after 2 days prior to the next examination, suddenly there was a lockdown again. The same was for the long-term follow-up, as I said, planned for 3 to 6 years, is now 3 to 8 years, and will hopefully be finished in the next few weeks. Patients were not allowed to go to the outpatient, afraid of going to the hospital for fear of getting COVID there. And the stroke card registry finally started in late 2020. So be prepared, catastrophes definitely do happen. You can never prepare for catastrophes like COVID, but what we started since 2020 charts, and I think for the course of time, I will not go into detail, but they are from companies use these risk charts. They're easy to use, and they are more or less a basic for discussion of risks. And at least for the higher risks, you should have a very good plan B. And another thing with the youth cohort that was quite funny or quite surprising for me, maybe I have become too old to understand it, but gut microbiota is a very interesting thing. Probably you know more about it than I do, but we very successfully applied it to the BRUNIC cohort. So we decided for the new youth cohort, we'll collect stool samples. And when we went to our cooperation partner, so what do you need for information from our youth cohort? They came up with this chart we had to give to the 14 to 19-year-olds. So luckily they have signed the informed consent prior to this. So when we handed out this was a lot of giggling. So we gave out the tubes, and when they came back for the examination, it was, who has a stool sample? Who has a stool sample? So it was almost like dealing drugs. So nobody was giving the stool samples to us. And when they came to the actual physician talk, to the specific talk, they were like, oh, you know, I have this stool sample here for you. So it turned out that only 10% of the youth were supplying stool samples. So the pitfall here, or the lessons learned: good ideas do not always work in the real world setting. So better be prepared, and better try in the cohort that you are aiming at, whether you're your research approach is appreciated. Just a few words, yeah, I have time. Just a few words about regulatory issues. So I've long lived in this ivory tower in the academic setting with research interest, and we were always looking a bit jealous on the companies that were like swimming in money when doing research, but they didn't have primarily commercial interest. And VASCage is trying to be a link between the two entities, but it comes with a lot of pitfalls that we have experienced as a center that is dedicated to translational research. And there are just some things. If you plan a study, or if you want to cooperate with a study, you first have to check who is the sponsor. The sponsor has all the legal responsibility for every aspect of the trial. So you are responsible for everything. You have to finance it. And in the end, if there's a problem, you're responsible, or you have written dedicated responsibility to someone else. But the sponsor also receives the pseudonymized data and also the samples. So the sponsor finally decides who the samples can be. This comes primarily with the research interests, and many universities do not allow commercial use of samples. Also, the second pitfall we have experienced is the informed consent. You have to detail in the informed consent what will happen. You have to detail a lot of things, but we also have to detail what will happen with the data and the samples at the end of the research project, and whether these samples can be used for commercial purposes or only for research purposes. And by academic centers usually do not only consider research purposes. This has become especially complex as the EU regulation for in vitro diagnostics is getting into force, and you no longer have only to supply the analytic performance and scientific validity for a test, but also the clinical performance. And for those clinical performance tests, you're not supposed to use research samples, or it's not really entirely sure whether the EU will accept research samples for validation of your tests. So to sum up, cooperation between academia and industry is extremely funny and extremely fruitful. It's a bit strange because companies tend to have a bit tighter timelines than academic centers. They always are very much more outcome oriented than academic centers. A good hint is to field test the study protocol prior to a large rollout. So you should know how much work it is and whether the personnel is available, how much personnel you need, and if these procedures are accepted by the target population. Catastrophes definitely do happen, not always as bad as COVID, but other catastrophes. So risk assessment tools are also make sense for academic projects. Please take a lot of time to review your informed consent. Is really, really very crucial. What the patient signs or the participant signs is what you can do. This is what it comes bottom line down to. Sponsor is and contact the sponsor. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. If you want to get in touch with VASCage for research project, you can either contact the office email address or myself. Thank you.